Barney M from La Jolla, California.
My name is Barney Morris, and I'm an alcoholic and a furniture mover. Nice to be here tonight. I suppose that I should, since I am in Rome, do as the Romans do, so I will. Through the grace of God and a fellowship known as Alcoholics Anonymous, it hasn't been necessary for me to have a drink or any chemical stronger than an aspirin since May 25th, 1972. We don't do that in California. You kind of let them guess for a while, you know. Have to sit there for 30 minutes listening to some boob before he finally tells you he's been sober 28 minutes. But it really is a delight to be here. I was just thinking tonight as I sat there, when I was thinking, gee, you really ought to give your sobriety date as they do in Texas, because that's the way they do things here. And that got me to thinking about some of my early meetings and how I felt in those meetings and how discouraged I was and how depressed I was and how angry I was and how I felt that life was over. Life was finished for me, and I knew it. I knew that I had it, that I couldn't go on much further. My wife was gone. She had divorced me. I had lost my home. I had lost my cars. I had lost my credit cards. I was thousands of dollars in debt. My wife did attend Al-Anon long enough to give me custody of my 6 children. And I was living in Santa Monica, California, in a little apartment with these 6 kids. And I was so tired. I just was tired. I just felt so depressed. And here I am in these dreary AA meetings, and I was sitting there listening to how wonderful it all is, and how good it's going to be later, and just keep coming back. And just listening to all this nonsense going on and on and on, and just sitting there so depressed and so frustrated. And night after night after night, I can remember driving to meetings, hating the fact that I was doing it, hating myself for doing it, hating my weakness, hating my fear, hating my frustrations about life, and just in so much pain and wanting to drive my car into a concrete abutment, and I thought of that. Sometimes it was one exit ramp at a time for me. Because I just didn't want to go on. And I was just sitting there thinking, what a long way from those days to be, somebody would call you, a man you don't even know, calls you from Amarillo, Texas, to come and talk to a bunch of people you've never met about something you don't do anymore. And it's absolutely astonishing. Only in Alcoholics Anonymous, And to come here and to be treated so well and so kindly. Jim has been so nice to me, and Joanna and Jay this afternoon were nice enough. I know they didn't have another thing to do. I mean, Joanna has been busy at all I know trying to put this thing together, but I happened to mention that I've never been to Amarillo, and I said, I hate to come into a city and go to the hotel and do whatever I'm going to do and then go get on an airplane and leave. And then you get back where you came from and they say, what was Amarillo like? And you have to say, I don't know, I didn't see it. So we drove down into downtown Amarillo, and we looked around, and Actually, I was very impressed. I went to Joanna's office, which looked like something that was designed for Howard Hughes. And we went up there and we looked around, looked out the window, and walked all around and just had a real good time. But it was terrific. It was just fun. And everybody here has been so nice. And Bob, gosh, came with Jay to the airport yesterday and grabbed my suitcase and carried it all the way into the hotel, clear into my room. And everybody's been so nice and so friendly here, and I've really enjoyed it. I am not a circuit speaker, as I think of circuit speakers, and my reaction when I got the call from Jim was, you're really supposed to have 25 years when you do that, because it always seemed to me everybody had 25 years, you know. And so I thought somebody had made a terrible mistake. In about an hour, you're all going to think the same thing. I'll tell you a little bit about where I came from and how I came to be where I was in those days, 13 and a half years ago, sitting in those dingy meetings, hating myself and the world, because somehow it seems to me that my family didn't raise me to hit that spot when I was 35 years old. They had some good plans for me. I was born in New York and raised on the south side of Chicago, and I had a very nice family. I had a fine father who never made any money, but he was always worked hard, and he was a fine man, and he died when I was 14. And I had a wonderful mother who was one of 16 children from an Irish family, and she baked bread, and she made cakes and rolls, and she was just so wonderful. The only trouble with Mom was that she drank a lot. And so from time to time there was some question about what condition Mom was going to be in. And after my father died, it was kind of like the lid was off, and there was no longer a reason to stay sober, I guess, for her. And so she was drunk a lot until she died in 1963. And we didn't know anything about alcoholism in our neighborhood. I mean, some people just were drunks, that's all. And I had a lot of uncles who were drunks, and I had a few aunts that were drunks, all on my mother's side. They were a wild family. And it was embarrassing to me, and I felt funny, and I felt uncomfortable sometimes. I was afraid to bring my friends home because I didn't know whether she'd be the little lady with the apron making the cookies or if she'd just be drunker than hell laying on the floor rolling around screaming. I just didn't know. And so I had a tendency to go other places and go to other people's places and to try to stay away from home as much as possible. And I suppose in those days I was a qualified candidate for Al-Anon, or Alateen at least. Well, we didn't know anything about that stuff. We didn't know about alcoholism. We didn't know my mother had a disease. As a matter of fact, it's so odd. Not long ago, about 5 years ago, I was talking to my sister, who is a dear, sweet girl. And I casually mentioned something about my mother being an alcoholic, and she was terribly offended by that. It really shocked her, and she said, "How can you say such a thing about your own mother?" And I said, "But Helen, I'm an alcoholic. I'm not saying something evil. I'm talking about a disease here." "Well, you shouldn't talk that way about your mother." See, just the people don't get it. They just don't get it. But in any case, we had a nice life. And I can remember as a young man wanting some sort of fundamental things in life. I wanted to be rich and famous. I wanted it sometimes to the point of obsession, and I can remember as a teenager walking by the South Shore Country Club on the south side of Chicago and looking through those iron bars of the fence and seeing the guys in there playing golf, and I saw the cars they drove in and out of that place, and I was duly impressed, and I wanted those things, and I wanted them desperately. And I went on. I was very fortunate that I was able to have a good education. We had a Roman Catholic background, and I had Dominican nuns in grammar school and Carmelite priests in high school and the Holy Cross Fathers at the University of Notre Dame. And I was a very lucky young man to get that kind of an education. I hear people sometimes blame whatever religion they happen to be from for how they feel. They blame whatever religious training they had for the guilt that they feel. And as my friend John A. says so often, you probably feel guilty because you're guilty. But I don't blame the religion. I don't blame, certainly not those nuns. They taught me to read aloud. And if they hadn't, I'd have starved to death, I think. And I got a good education from those people. And I wanted desperately to be successful. I wanted to be somebody. I just wanted to be as rich and as famous as I could possibly get. And I ended up in a business that provided me an opportunity to kind of move in that direction. When I was at the University of Notre Dame, I got a job at the student radio station as an announcer and began working in the field of radio. And when I got out of college, I went to work for a station in a little town called Monroe, Michigan, which is about halfway between Detroit and Toledo. And then I went on and worked in Toledo, Ohio in radio, and went on into Detroit and finally into television. And by the time I was 26 years old, it astonishes me now when I think about it, I was the anchorman for a television station in Detroit owned by the American Broadcasting Company. And things went well, and the ratings were good, and we were successful, and the money was just coming in hand over fist. Now, you probably noticed I haven't talked anything about drinking yet. That's because I wasn't drinking yet. I was, I think, maybe a social drinker. I don't know. It just wasn't important to me. It wasn't important to me until I began to make some money. It wasn't important to me until I began to be successful. It wasn't important to me until I began to hang out in a lot of very lavishly padded sewers around the city of Detroit. Because I think in the beginning, I just sort of liked the atmosphere in those joints. To this day, I love the smell of stale beer coming out of a bar at 7 o'clock in the morning. It's just something special about that. I don't know how to explain it. Just love it. But I love the atmosphere in those places, and I love the sort of dark lights and the pianos and the people, and it was all sort of grown up and sophisticated. And I heard our speaker this afternoon talking about associating the notion of heavy drinking with being a man. And I don't know where I got that piece of information either, but I associated it that way. I thought if you could drink hard and outdrink everybody in the joint and just get loaded and stay up all night and show up for work the next day, you were a man. I don't know where I got that piece of information. I don't remember anybody ever telling me that. But that's what I thought. And I loved alcohol. I loved booze, and I loved the atmosphere around it. And so about the age of, I suppose, around 25, 26, I began to drink. Now, I don't know whether I ever really drank socially once that began. I'm not sure. But I know if I did, it didn't last long. Because the fact is that I like what alcohol does for me. I like the feeling I get. And from time to time, well-meaning people that I have met through my life. Nice people who wanted to help me would say things to me like, "Barney, you're such a nice guy. Why do you drink so much?" And I'd have to say, because it makes me feel better. That's why I drank. It makes me feel better. And anything that makes me feel like that, I want some more. Give me some more. And I drank, and I drank, and I drank heavily. Now, I'd gotten married, and we had begun to have children, and I had a home, and I had cars, and I had things, and I had begun to accumulate all of the stuff in life that I thought was important. And my wife was beginning to become very upset with my drinking. It bothered her a lot. And I had a tendency, when I drank, to kind of forget things. Like where I was going or where I'd been, who I talked to, who I was with, whom I'd insulted. But I had a bad memory, and I would disappear sometimes, not come home at all. And she thought that was a little peculiar. And my answer always was very simple. Yeah, I know, but I was drunk. So when I get drunk, I don't know what I'm doing. That's just the way it is. And that answer seemed to satisfy her for a while, I guess. I don't know if it satisfied her, but she got to the point where she didn't say much about it anymore. I guess she just expected me to be that way. Now, it was nice to be a successful guy. It was nice to have a career going. And my idea was that I'd be in New York before I was 30. And that I'd have one of those network anchor jobs, and I'd be a big time and a big star, and it'd be all right. Then I'd feel okay, because I'm going to tell you something very odd about myself. Something I never really analyzed much until I got to Alcoholics Anonymous, because in my neighborhood we weren't big on psychiatry. So I never spent a lot of time analyzing how I felt. It never occurred to me to wonder. But the truth is that as I see it now in retrospect, that I felt most of the time kind of ill at ease, kind of uncomfortable about life, kind of like somebody, almost as if I was in the middle of a Hollywood movie most of the time, and somebody was going to strike the set and it was all going to be gone. As if it was just going to end suddenly. I used to suffer from fear, but I never put a label on it. I never knew that it was fear. I just knew that sometimes I used to come to wherever I came to, and if it was in my own bedroom, it was a surprise. I would come to and I would think, I don't think I can go out there today. I don't think I can face them one more time. I don't think I can go out there in the world and try to be somebody again today. Why don't they just leave me alone? I'm so tired. I'm tired of trying to pretend that I'm a big success story, because I don't feel like a big success story. I'm just kind of uncomfortable. And I don't want to face people today, and I don't want to be with them today, and I don't want to look at that boss of mine again today. And I don't want to have to be whatever it is he needs me to be today, so he'll let me be successful, so that my career will keep moving and they won't suddenly discover the truth about me and take it all away from me. I was afraid. Most of the time, I managed to get myself out of the bedroom. I managed to take a shower and get dressed and get in the car and go to work. But unfortunately, in that world out there, it's very difficult to tell people the truth. It's very hard, for example, when I get to work to walk in and have the boss walk by and say, "Hey, Barney, how you doing today?" And I have to say, "I'm afraid." "Oh, really? What are you afraid of?" "I don't know. It beats me. I just woke up that way this morning, just a little nervous, a little crazy, a little afraid, a little upset. I'm afraid of you. I'm afraid of your boss. I'm afraid of the people I work around. I'm afraid of that 22-year-old kid you just hired because he may want my job. I'm scared to death that my wife's going to find out what I was doing last week if I could remember what I was doing last week. I'm afraid I'm going to lose what I've got, and I'm afraid I'm never going to be successful, not the way I want to be successful." And you walk in the office and sit down with a group of writers and producers and bright people and sit down in the middle of them, and you're the anchor man, right? You're the guy that's in charge. And they say, "How you doing, Barney?" I say, "Well, I have a deep-seated sense of inadequacy." I don't think I fit in here very well. You people all seem so smart to me and so bright and articulate, and I'm ill at ease here because I feel dumb sometimes, and I feel like I really haven't got it together some days, and I just feel like I'm going to die some days is how I feel. I'm just so scared of life. Now, the answer I learned out there in the world is, "I'm fine. How are you?" And I went on that way. I went on feeling, well, for example, sometimes knowing deep down inside that I'm more sensitive than others. I just feel things more deeply than you do. I've always known that secretly. Oh, sure, if I say something to offend you or hurt your feelings, you'll probably be a little upset. But if you do it to me, you'll just destroy me. It'll kill me. I can't handle it. God, don't criticize me. I can't take it. Because then it starts a whole thought process in my mind that's not like your mind. I know I'm different from you. You people look okay, and you talk okay, and you walk okay, and you look fine. And I'm half crazy most of the time. But I've got to look good, because I have to be a success. Now, all I'm talking about is somebody who's an extraordinary neurotic. But you pour alcohol on that, you got something. And I poured alcohol on it. I poured a lot of booze on it. I did it for a lot of years. I embarrassed myself in 1,000 ways. My reputation finally reached ABC in New York. And people were talking about me. And comments were coming back. You can just dance on so many bars in so many saloons at 2 o'clock in the morning, and they find out. And then the word comes back. You got a real problem, kid. You got a real problem. And then the heat's on. I don't like it when the heat's on. Because when the heat's on, I got to shape up. And I don't want to shape up. I don't like to shape up. I like to be me. But I got to shape up. So I quit drinking for a while. I did that a lot. I just quit drinking for a while. Because they're suggesting to me that I have a drinking problem. I don't have a drinking problem. I'll quit for a while. I'll be fine. And I do. Stop drinking for 5 days, 6 days, 7 days. And then my wife would look at me and say, gee, you look so good. You haven't had a drink in a week, and just, you're looking good. The puffiness is coming out of your face, and God, you're coming home at night. It's so nice. And the children are just so glad to see you, and gosh, it's just wonderful. One time when I was being good, I used to call it being good. When I was being particularly good, I went down to the Catholic Church on the corner and offered to teach their Sunday school class. I talked to the Monsignor down there, and I told him the truth. I said, I'm getting in trouble at home. And you see, my wife, she's got this problem with my drinking. Now, I'm not really an alcoholic. She thinks I am. But I'm not, and I don't have a drinking problem, but I thought maybe I could kind of come back to God. Now, I got to tell you, when I was a kid, I used to go to church, and I'd sit there and stare at the statues and the walls and the windows and the Ten Commandments and whatever else was around, and I'd listen to Monsignor McGuire talk about the pagans. It took me years to find out who the pagans were, but he used to talk about the pagans all the time. And I never felt anything. I never believed anything. I knew I was different from the rest of the people in the church because none of it meant anything to me. It was just, it could have been anything. I could have been reading the Gettysburg Address. It didn't matter. It just wasn't important to me. I tell you what, when I got to AA and I hit the phrase, conscious contact with God, the bells rang. And I said, yeah, that's what I don't have. I don't know what that is. All those other people have that, and apparently these people in AA have it. And I don't have it and never could have it. It's impossible for me. What's conscious contact? What is that? I knew that when I was a kid. So the bottom line is that I offered to teach Sunday school, but I never bothered to tell the Monsignor I didn't believe in God. Probably would have upset him anyway. Jim, can I get that iced tea from you? Thank you. Salud. But I taught Sunday school. And that was one of my times of being good. But I would stay sober for a while, and my wife would say I looked good, and I would show up for work every day. And I would be there on time. And it would be obvious that I wasn't hungover. And no more stories were coming from out of the night. And I was doing a good job. And I was working hard. And I was pushing hard trying to be successful. And I was doing the best I could. And I'd take the kids to Little League. And I'd take them to Y Indian guides. And I'd try to make a totem pole. And I never could get those things straight. The other fathers, they had nice totem poles. Mine always was crooked, and it looked funny. But I would do it. And we'd sit around, and we'd have powwows and headdresses, and I would be and I would take out the garbage, and I would wash the windows, and I would cut the grass. I mean, it was wonderful. I was being good. And it looked fine. But I got a little problem. When I've been good just so long, I get so nervous I could scream. And I just somehow know that the next guy that walks up to me and tells me how good I look, I'm going to rip out his jugular vein. Because unlike anybody else that I know, I just don't deal with life very well. I get nervous. I get uncomfortable. I have anxiety attacks. It's hard for me to function. It's hard for me to work. And a week and a half goes by, and 2 weeks, and I haven't had a drink. And I'm just ready to die. And then I know I've been good long enough. And I got to relax. I got to relax. I need a little reward. And I go out and I have a couple of drinks. I'm not going to drink all night. I'm just going to have a couple. I'm only having a couple. Then I'm going home. And I have a couple of drinks. And I feel better. And I wonder why I waited so long. Oh, God. And the sharp edges come off, and I get comfortable again, and I'm all right again. I have a couple of more and a couple of more, and it's just, Jesus, it's all right. It's okay again, and life is all right, and who's that blonde that just walked in? Tell her there's a television star down here who wants to talk to her. Get the champagne down here. Send the piano player a few numbers, and how much does he want? I don't care. Money is no object. How many people want linguinis? Serve them all. Because there is this one peculiar oddity about my drinking that'd just break your heart. Because it's such a good friend, because it makes me feel so good, there's this one dumb thing. Once I begin to drink, I don't seem to be able to stop. I just keep going. On and on and on. And I black out again, and I travel again, and I forget where I am again. It's enough to just break your heart. And I don't mean to be like that. That isn't me. I didn't do those things. I just do that when I'm drunk. But they don't understand. And then you get the looks again, and then you get the comments again, and then they're on your case again. Jesus, you spent all that time being good, and it's like you never did it. They have no memories of the good stuff. But that, in my view, was not a drinking problem. I don't have a drinking problem was my position, because when I drink, I feel better. It's when I stay sober too long, I get crazy. I have a sobriety problem. Now, you try to explain that to one of them blue noses out there. They think you're nuts when you tell them that. Oh, really? Yes. Sobriety, too much of that just gets me crazy. I have to drink sometimes. Well, when I was 35 years old, my wife divorced me because she'd had enough. And I lost the house, and I lost the credit cards, and I lost the cars, and I was living in that apartment. I'm not alcoholic. I'm not alcoholic. I don't even drink every day. I don't drink in the morning unless I'm drunk from the night before. I've never been hospitalized for alcoholism. I have never been arrested for drunk driving. I drove drunk all the time. I have never been arrested for it. Carrying a press card helps a little. But the truth is that I had these ideas in my mind about my own drinking, and nobody could change them. But on the other hand, I was in that dingy little apartment with those 6 kids. Now, I don't know where you go when you're really not alcoholic, when your problem is sensitivity, when your problem is just being afraid all the time, when your problem is that you just feel so damned inadequate, when your problem is that life just is unbearable for you most of the time, when you're just not like the other people, I don't know where you go. They don't have a place for people like me. When I drink, I look alcoholic. So it would be easy to make that mistake. And I had met a man who was a member of Alcoholics Anonymous some months before. And this guy hadn't had a drink, he told me, in over 4 years. And he seemed rather proud of it. He just seemed delighted with that fact. And he talked to me a little bit, and we kind of talked, and I didn't drink 20 to 40 half quarts of beer a day as he did, so therefore I wasn't like him. Oh, thank God. But I knew that my drinking was enough like his in some peculiar way that maybe he would understand. And so I called him. And I said, you remember meeting me? And he said, yes. And I said, now, I'm not an alcoholic. I want you to know that right away. I am not an alcoholic, but I got to quit drinking for a while. Because, see, my wife is gone, and I've lost everything through a series of bad breaks and misunderstandings. It's all gone. And I've got these 6 kids, and I've got to get my act together one more time. Because I got to get my career going. I can't help what she's doing. My life and my career are important here. And I got to quit drinking for a while. Now, I can do all right for about a week and a half. But I need to quit for about 60 days. And I can't make that alone. I thought maybe you could talk to me here on the phone and tell me what it is you do. And you could tell me, and then I could do that, and then I could kind of cool it for a while, you know. And he said, well, I can't explain it to you on the phone. And he said, what we'll do, we'll go to an AA meeting tonight. And I said, oh, no, you don't understand. I can't go out to a public place, you know, and say I'm an alcoholic. Do you know what I do? You know what that could do to my career? He said, well, you've been talking to me for a while, and I understand that you've gotten drunk in an awful lot of bars. He said, what's that doing for your career? I said, well, what's it like when you go there? He said, I'll just be a bunch of guys. It's a stag meeting. It'll be fine. You'll be all right. You just go with me. It'll be okay. So we went to the meeting, and there were about 60 guys there. And they all got up and participated and told these horrible stories. Terrible things that happened to these people. And I began to go to these meetings. This fella seemed to think it was important to go every day. Now, I didn't drink every day, but I thought there was like some secret they were going to give me. After a while, they tell you, you know. And so I kept going, and I kept waiting to hear this magic thing that was going to happen. And they kept saying the same things. They kept reading the same part of the same stupid book. Chapter 5 and how it works. I thought, that's why I asked him one night, I said, why do they always read the same part? He said, well, because that's the heart of our program, the 12 steps. I said, oh. That's what they talk about God and everything in there. I said, I can't buy into that. He said, well, that's okay. He said, you can have any higher power you want to, Barney, as long as you're reasonably sure it isn't you. I said, all right, you're my higher power. He said, well, I wouldn't pick me if I were you. I said, why not? He said, I may get drunk tomorrow. I said, no, I'll take a chance. You've been around a while. You'll be my higher power. And so he was. And then, of course, I reached the point where he wasn't. I began to see his character defects. And then I decided I'd better have my higher power be all of the people in my group. And then finally I decided at some point that it would be Alcoholics Anonymous worldwide. All the alcoholics around the world linked together in sobriety. What a spiritual, wonderful thing that was. That was my higher power, and that got me past the 3rd step so I could do the 4th step. And the 5th step. But in those early meetings, I was very depressed, really depressed. Because as I had suspected, these alcoholics are different from me. Because it seemed to me that when I would go in and I would hear people speak, they were all kind of delivering the same theme. Oh, they said it in different ways, and they had different backgrounds, but the theme seemed the same. And it was sort of, I drank day and night for 40 years. And I lost everything, and I was spiritually bankrupt in every department. And physically bankrupt, and financially bankrupt. And I was wiped out. And I had nothing left. And then I walked through those doors. And I put the plug in the jug. And I haven't had a drink now in 27 years. And I have found God here, and this wonderful way of life and these 12 golden steps. And I have become a multimillionaire and have $9 million right here in my pocket. But it all began with not taking the first drink. And I'm sitting there at meeting after meeting after meeting after meeting, and I'm listening to this, and I'm thinking, apparently, when they quit drinking, they feel better. And I don't feel better. I've tried that dozens of times. Quit drinking, I get crazy. And I went to AA meetings, and I went to AA meetings, and then the man who had taken me to my meetings, I decided would be my sponsor because everybody had a sponsor. I don't like heat. I just don't like heat. And the heat you get in the AA meetings just is more than you can bear. They come up to you and say, have you identified yet? No, I haven't. Have you found God yet? No, and I don't expect to. Who's your sponsor? I don't have one. So I asked this guy to be my sponsor. I'll get that heat off. That was the first biggest mistake I made in AA. This man overnight, when he became my sponsor, turned from being a kind, gentle soul to being the most cruel human being I've ever met. So, all right, if I'm going to be your sponsor, you go to 90 meetings in 90 days. You're going to be the coffee maker on Saturday night. That means you get here at 6 o'clock. 2 Tuesday night, you're going to mop the floors after the meeting. And Thursday night, I want you to stand at the door of the meeting and shake hands with everybody that walks in. I said, well, I'm not very outgoing. I don't like to. I said, I even drank alone the last couple of years. I said, I don't want to meet these people. He said, I don't really care what you want. He said, you're going to pick up newcomers and you're going to drive them to meetings. You're going to do a lot of things around here. He said, now, if you don't want to do what I'm suggesting, that's perfectly all right with me. All you have to do is tell your next sponsor about it. He seemed to leave me no room for maneuvering. I just felt trapped. So in order to keep the heat off, I did what he asked me to do. Made the coffee on Saturday night, mopped the floors on Tuesday night. I was the greeter on Thursday night. He's giving me addresses of people to go pick up newcomers. I mean, some of these people are unemployed. Come on. And I'm driving them to this dingy meeting where you hear one more speaker tell you how wonderful it is. I hated it, and I hated it, and I hated it. I hated the book. I read the book, and I just felt it was really badly written to begin with. I just didn't like it. I thought it was very sophomoric. I thought that it was written in such a way that it could have been written by a freshman at high school. Just simple, so simple stuff. I mean, come on. I've studied a lot of philosophy. I had 16 hours of theology at Notre Dame. Come on. Let's get to the heavy stuff. I mean, this is too direct. Are you kidding? And my sponsor would just look at me scornfully and say, why don't you go back and read the book again, and this time read the black part instead of the white part? The man was unbelievable. So I would go, and I would do it, and I would do it, and I would do it. And day by day by day, I just got crazier and crazier. I just got so upset most of the time. I used to sit in coffee shops and scream at him. This isn't doing me any good. I still owe thousands of dollars. I'm still living in that apartment with those 6 kids. My career's going nowhere. What good is this? And he'd say, you just keep coming back. Finally, when I was 7 months sober, no drinking for 7 months, crazy as a loon, identifying with nobody, pretending I'm an alcoholic. And I'm sitting in this meeting one night on the west side of Los Angeles, and they introduce the speaker, and it's Clancy I. This is a man who is my sponsor's sponsor, so I don't tell anybody I don't like him, but I don't like him. And I knew he had nothing to say to me. And I wanted no part of him, but I was trapped at the front of the meeting. And my sponsor was sitting in the front row, and the only way out was right past him. And I really didn't want to have to explain it to him. I hate your sponsor. Then you get into a whole thing about, So I sat. And he started. And he tells this terrible story. I mean, he left families in mailboxes all over the United States. He played piano in a whorehouse in San Francisco. He was an inmate at the Texas State Insane Asylum. Good Lord, what a story. I don't identify with that kind of drinking. I don't identify with that kind of a pattern. I don't identify with a man who ended up on Skid Row trying to sell his blood, and they wouldn't take it anymore because it wasn't up to their standards. But I'll tell you something. He talked about some things to me, that night, that hit home. And they had nothing to do with the drinking, really. He talked about fear in a way that I had never heard it described. He talked about his sensitivity. He talked about feelings of inadequacy and not fitting in. He talked about a sense of just the world not understanding him very well. A sense of needing to run a lot. And he finished that talk and he said, if you're walking around with a set of feelings anything like what I'm describing, and you seem somehow unable to control and enjoy your drinking, there's a name for that. It's a disease called alcoholism. And if you got it, there's no cure for it. So you may as well hang around here with the rest of the lepers. And I ran up to him after the meeting and I said, if what you said tonight is true, I may be alcoholic. He said, how long have you been around here? I said, 7 months. He said, God, you're a quick study. These were the days of the miniskirts. And there was a woman at my regular weekly meeting who was 3 years sober longer than I was, who was absolutely gorgeous. And she had great, beautiful, long legs. And she had beautiful red hair. She was tall and stately. And I had a spiritual experience. I used to chase her around at the meetings. Come on, have lunch with me, have lunch with me. Dinner, anything. How long have you been sober? What difference does it make? I don't date anyone with less than a year. Besides, I don't like alcoholic men. I chased this girl for a long time. Then she found out I had 6 kids. But when I was 1.5 years sober, she married me. She had 2 kids, and so we set about raising these 8 children. Now, my assumption was that if 2 alcoholics get married, that they're somehow going to walk the golden 12 steps together. And it ain't that way. We weren't dancing through the tulips the way I thought we would. I've discovered that when 2 alcoholics get married, there is a serious question on any given day as to who's in charge. I tried being serene sometimes. I'd say, you're not working the 3rd step very well. She'd say, shut up, newcomer. The last thing she said to me yesterday was, well, big shot newcomer, what are you going to tell them in Amarillo? Woman needs Al-Anon desperately. But when I was 2.5 years sober, I got the job of my life. CBS called and offered me this tremendous job in Philadelphia, anchoring for their flagship station in Philadelphia. Not far from New York. And they offered me a ton of money. And they flew me back there and they wined us. Well, they didn't wine us, but they dined us. And we went back and I told my sponsor, I said, this is my reward for being sober. Now I'm going to make it. Now I'm going to get rich and famous. Now it's going to be okay. The promises of the program are being fulfilled. Well, I went back to Philadelphia and I found out I didn't like their AA much. They had kind of weird meetings back there. I was used to huge speaker meetings. And they had sort of small discussion meetings, and they didn't read chapter 5. And they didn't read the traditions. And they didn't have birthday cakes. They call them anniversaries instead of birthdays. And they didn't sing happy birthday. And I don't know, it was different. They just were different. And I did the only thing that any right-thinking egomaniac can do. I denied them my presence. I didn't go to their meetings mostly. I started a meeting California style. And I was the secretary of that meeting. I wrote the format. And I picked the speakers. I made the coffee. I greeted the people at the door. I was in action. And I got sicker and sicker and sicker. My job wasn't going well to begin with because those people were putting a lot of pressure on me. And I was beginning to feel it. I was feeling a lot of anxiety, and I was beginning to feel a lot of fear, and I was beginning to feel a lot of just a sense that I was in the wrong place at the wrong time. And my wife turned on me, and she began to look at me funny. And my kids turned on me. They were doing things like drinking and using drugs. Can you imagine that? And I was going crazy. I didn't know what to do. The ratings weren't going up, and I was getting really scared. And a man with 18 years of sobriety sat down with me one night, and he said, "How you doing?" And I said, "Do you really want to know? How much time have you got?" I said, "That woman I married doesn't understand me. I'm under so much pressure at work I can't stand it. I'm trying to be a success. I'm trying to make it in sobriety, and everybody's against me. My kids, my wife, my job, everybody. And I'm just crazy." Now, when I get to that stage, I fully expect somebody to sit down and philosophize with me and begin to discuss life with me. This guy didn't do that. He began to do the very thing that I know won't work. He started asking me AA questions. He said, "How many meetings do you go to?" I said, "Well, I haven't had time for meetings here. I'm busy. Got a big job, making a lot of money, trying to make it. Besides, I don't like the meetings here." He said, "How many newcomers are you working with?" I said, "Oh, well, I've never been any good at that. Everybody I ever worked with got drunk. Everybody. I'm just not good at that. Some people are good at that. I'm just not good at it. Besides, I haven't met any newcomers here on the East Coast." He said, "Yes, I know. They go to those meetings you don't attend. Hardly any of them are going to come in here in your living room and ask for help." And then he asked me the toughest question of all. He said, "What are you doing about the third step?" And I told him that I had a lot of difficulty with that God stuff. And I said, my higher power is Alcoholics Anonymous worldwide, and all the people around the world linked together in sobriety. He said, "How's it working for you today?" I said, "Well, it doesn't work at all. It's just third step. I don't know." He said, "Well, I think you're going to have to start going to those meetings whether you approve of the way they're run or not. And I suggest you go in and sit down and shut up and just listen." He said, "I think that you are going to have to begin to work with newcomers because they may save your life. And I think finally, Barney, that you're going to have to start to pray." And I said, "I can't pray." He said, "Why?" I said, "It makes me feel like a phony." He said, "Oh, that's okay. You are a phony." I said, "You mean I can say a phony prayer?" He said, "Sure. To a phony God? Absolutely. Take the action, whether you believe in it or not." And so I began to go to those stupid meetings I didn't like, and it turned out they were okay. And I began to grab newcomers by the throat and threaten them. "You call me at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning." And some of them did. And some of them stayed sober, which just blew me away. Because then it's a problem, you know, because they're in your living room, they're in your kitchen, they're on the phone. You can't get rid of them. And when you're trying to go to meetings and look like a Class A #1 type sponsor, you want to look good as a sponsor. What are you going to do when they walk up to you and say, "How do you work the third step?" If you have to say, "I don't know, I never tried that one." So what I had to begin to do with these guys was do something that is the most painful experience I can have. I had to open the zipper and let them see what was inside. I don't want anybody to know that. But I had to tell him the truth. I had to tell him that I was frightened and weak, that I was really not a very good member of AA sometimes, and that I didn't know what to do about the third step, and that I was trying to say this phony prayer because it's all I knew how to do, and I was sitting there talking to them because I hoped they could keep me sober that day. I wasn't getting along with my wife, and I wasn't doing well in work, and I was just not a very good story. Something very peculiar happened. In a few months, I began to feel better. My wife changed her attitude. Some of the kids even started shaping up. And then I got fired. And then I went back to San Diego. I worked there for a while, and I quit my job. And then in 1978, I was out of work for 5 months. And I ran out of money. And I was 3 months behind on the mortgage payment. And I was getting behind on the car payments. And I knew somehow that I was never going to work again in television because I didn't have it in me anymore. I was burned out. And I had failed miserably. And my wife looked at me one night and she said, "You have got to be the biggest loser I ever met." And I knew she was right. I went for a walk on the beach. I thought about getting drunk that night. But I had too many babies calling me. What are you going to say? I'm drunk? Call somebody else? Can't do that. You look bad. But I knew that she was going to divorce me, finally divorce me, and it was the end. And I knew the house was going to go. And I knew I'd never work again, and I knew it was all over. That finally, this phony life of mine had come down to what I really was, which was a peeled zero. Less than nothing. And I knew it. And I hated it. But I knew it was true. And I was 6.5 years sober. Now, I don't mind losing it all drunk. But I'll tell you something, when you fall on your face that sober, you're really weird. I was walking on the beach that night, and I was saying my phony prayer. And I didn't know what to do, and I thought, what are you saying that stupid prayer for? And then I looked up at the sky, and I shook my fist, and I said the first honest prayer I'd ever said. "You SOB, I give up!" If I had known that night that I was surrendering, I probably wouldn't have done it. I just gave up. I gave up trying to be anything. I gave up career goals. I gave up trying to make my wife happy. I couldn't do it. I gave up trying to shape up those kids. I gave up because I couldn't do it anymore. I didn't have it in me. I'd failed miserably. And I couldn't stand myself anymore. And then I walked down the beach saying my phony prayer. And I got the weird feeling somebody was listening. And I thought, look, God, I got to feed those kids after she's gone and the house is gone. I got to feed them. Let me just sell tacos in Laguna Beach. Let me just do whatever I got to do and just show up and look alert at whatever I do. Because I can't impress anybody anymore, and I can't be anything anymore, and I know I'm a failure, and I know I'm nothing, but for God's sake, help me just to sell tacos. And I walked down the beach, and I said myself phony prayer. And I got home, and the phone rang. And a man called me from Los Angeles with ABC. He said, "I hear you're out of work." I said, "Yes, I am." He said, "Well, I need a guy for 90 days to come up here and be a reporter." And I almost said, that close, "What do you mean, reporter? I used to be the anchor man in that place." And I stopped. Tacos in Laguna Beach. I went up to go to work for this man for 90 days. And I decided I'm just going to show up and look alert and do what they asked me to do and shut up. And I'm not going to try and run their station for them. I'm not going to try to run that news department. I'm not going to try to tell anybody anything because I don't know anything. Just remember, Barney, you are a peeled zero and you'll be all right. And I began to show up and just try to look alert and do the stories they asked me to do. And I was parking in this parking lot about 2 miles away from the newsroom on this huge lot in Hollywood. And walking all the way into the newsroom and walking past a parking place that used to have my name on it. And now it has somebody else's. And walking in and seeing a 23-year-old assignment editor who would hand me an assignment sheet and say, "Here, do you think you can handle this story?" I was terribly tempted to tell him who I was. And to explain to him about his mother. But I would take the assignment sheet, I would go do the interview, and I would try to do as good a job as I could. And I was into that job about 2 months, and the guy who was the boss walked up to me, and he said, "Hey," he says, "I like you. Why don't you stick around? I'd like you to sign a contract." He said, "Let's sit down and negotiate a deal." And I said, "I'm sorry, I don't negotiate anymore." He said, "What do you mean you don't negotiate?" I said, "Oh," he says, "who's your agent?" I said, "I don't have an agent anymore." He said, "Well, we got to negotiate a deal, Barn. I want you to sign a 5-year contract." I said, "I'll tell you what you do. Why don't you just write a number on the piece of paper and I'll sign it? How's that?" And he said, "You sure?" I said, "Yeah." He wrote a number on the piece of paper, much bigger than anything I would have asked him for. And I signed it. And I've been working ever since. I signed another new deal a couple of years ago. No negotiations. Just write the number on the piece of paper. I will never be the richest man in the cemetery. I know that. It's okay. What I have decided to do is accept what's going on in my life. I have a car to drive. I have clothes to wear. I have a home to live in. I tell you what I did at home. I decided I was going to do with my wife what I did with my job. I just show up and look alert. And that's the truth. I don't tell her to work her steps anymore. I don't explain to her how her program is failing. I don't tell her how she ought to be dealing with her babies. She's got 16 years of sobriety. She doesn't hear it from me anyway. And the peculiar thing is, oddly enough, in some strange way, we have come closer and closer and closer and closer and closer. Today, that woman is my best friend. Bar none, the best friend I have. Because I listen to her. I listen to her. I don't advise her. I listen to her. And she listens to me. And we love one another in some peculiar way that only in Alcoholics Anonymous can you discover it. At least, it's where I got it. Maybe some people find it in church. Some people find it in a psychiatrist's office, a psychologist's office. Some people find it on a mountain in Asia. I found it in AA. Love. A sense of real love that I never knew anything about. I haven't had a drink all day today. I haven't been afraid today. Oh, a little nervous before I got up here, but not afraid. Because I'm with people who are like me. I'm with the lepers here. And we love one another. And I can't tell you how grateful I am for that. And how grateful I am for what you've done for me. I don't know most of you people. But I love you. Thank you.